Hi, I'm Orgone Nick and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to make some Orgonite, specifically Sun, Surf, and Sand Power Dome. And it looks like this. So if you want to make this piece with me, join me. Okay, so before we get started, I just wanted to show you the pieces that we'll need to make this piece of Orgonite. So first I want to show you my mold. It's a dome paperweight mold. I think it may be a 3-ounce mold, might be 4 ounces, I'm not sure. We'll see by the end. I normally would use some LEMURIAN seed crystals, but I've got these yellow crystals. I think they're called rabbit hair crystals. I'm not sure. They're just something that I found on eBay that I would like to use. I'm going to use some turquoise howlite. So it's a turquoise dyed howlite is what that is. And then we'll use some yellow jade. That'll look really nice. I'm using my brass shavings, rustic cut. I use polyester resin for my resin. You can certainly use epoxy, that's no problem. It's just going to take you a little bit longer. I keep my resin in a jar because it's just too cumbersome to pour small amounts from a big gallon jug, and I have my hardening drops for the resin. But I forgot a mixing cup, so I will be right back. Okay, so I'm back with my mixing cup and stirring stick. And so, oh yeah, forgot to mention, you'll need to make a copper coil. Maybe I should show you how to do that before we get started. Just a second. Okay, so to make our coil, we're going to use copper wire. I use 18 gauge. And I'm gonna cut off maybe about a foot. Just trim that off. We'll set that away, and then take our needle nose pliers and we're gonna grip it somewhere in the middle here, and then we're just gonna twist the wires around the needle nose pliers, and we want to keep it nice and even. I've kind of flattened it out with the pliers and just start helping along the copper coil, or the copper, to coil it around the center here that we've started. And so there we have it, a copper coil, and that's what we'll start with. So let's go ahead and pour some resin in here and start with the centerpiece. So I think I'm just going to pour about 3/4 of an ounce. Let's get out my mixing cup. So we're going to pour, yeah, about 3/4 of an ounce. Pour it in our mixing cup. And for my hardening drops, I'm not exactly sure how many the resin company recommends that we use, but I just remember when I used the recommended amount, it wasn't enough. So I started using 9 drops to start, and then 9 drops for every ounce thereafter. So I've used 3/4 of an ounce, and I'm just going to go ahead and use 15 drops. And we just want to make sure to stir that up really good, especially if you're using epoxy resin. when you mix the two parts together, you want to make sure that you stir it for at least 2 minutes to make sure that it's all blended. If you're using the polyester casting resin, you want to stir it until the mixture becomes clear again, and maybe a few moments thereafter, just to be sure. So I have a little mason jar to hold a cradle itself right in here, and I can move it about to be upright. So I'm just going to pour my resin right in to the top here. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and pour it all. And I'm going to stick our copper coil right down in the center. Let that sink. And then I'm going to get out my crystals, and since the crystals that I'm using are broken in, they're all broken in half. Like if I were using a LEMURIAN seed crystal, I would probably just wrap the crystal in copper wire and just let that be the centerpiece. But since I have these little kind of broken pieces, then I'm going to use these like rays of the sun around this spiral here. And while I'm setting these in here, I just want to tell you, oh God, they're not doing what I want them to do. This isn't great. Let's figure this out. Okay, so there's one. There we go. I've got them all kind of like sun's rays around that copper coil. So I'm just going to let that congeal. It doesn't need to harden all the way for me to start my next layer. Also, I want to mention that if you're concerned about bubbles getting in your piece, that's normal. Bubbles do occur. I recommend using a heat gun. You can also use one of those long lighters, but if you're going to use one of those long lighters, please be careful. Use quick passes over the resin, because if you hover too long in one area, you're going to set your resin on fire, which I've done numerous times, and that's why I don't use that, and that's also why I recommend the heat gun. Heat will make the bubbles rise to the top and pop, so that's what I recommend. But using polyester casting resin, I really don't run into bubbles all that often. They pretty much work their way out by the time I come back for the next layer. So that's what we'll do. We're going to wait for the next layer, and I will see you then. Okay, so we're back to do the next layer, and I did want to tell you that I forgot to mention I do intend to use beach sand to ground this piece out. I didn't mention that in the beginning when I showed you what you would need to make this piece, but I am intending to do the beach sand if I have enough room. Beach sand is basically tiny little quartz crystals, so it's perfect to ground out this piece, and I think it'll look really nice with this. So for my next layer, I'm going to pour about 3/4 of an ounce again. Just going to pour that into my mixing cup. And again, I'm going to use 15 drops of hardener for 3/4 of an ounce. Oh, I forgot to test this out. My last layer has congealed, so we're safe to go ahead and pour this amount of resin over it. It looks like the perfect amount of resin. Let me go get a measuring cup. I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back with my measuring cup, and I'm going to start with the yellow jade. Just gonna weigh it in grams. I like to weigh my gemstones in grams because if you search on eBay for gemstones, most of them come from China or Hong Kong, somewhere in Asia, and they measure things in grams. And so if I tell you how many grams of gemstones you'll need, then it's easier for you to buy them on eBay. So let's see here. I have about 46 grams. I don't think I'm going to use the whole thing, but we'll see. Just going to sprinkle them in here. So it's about 30 grams of yellow jade. And we're just going to let that congeal, and we'll come back to do the turquoise. Actually, the next layer will be brass, and then maybe some turquoise. I'm not sure if we can, I'm not sure what all we can fit in this piece. So yeah, we have a limited amount of space, and I'm not sure we can add the brass, the turquoise howlite, and the beach sand. So we'll see. You know what? I've decided, since we have such a limited amount of space, that I want to go ahead and pour some brass over this layer while the resin is still liquid. It's gonna not be like a perfectly flat layer. It's gonna sink a little bit to each of the gemstones, so it's gonna be a little rustic, but it might help us fit everything a little better. That's a big piece. So I used about 35 grams of brass shavings, and I'm just going to let that congeal, and we'll be back to do our turquoise howlite, and I think that's probably going to have to be our last layer. I think that we're not going to be able to fit the beach sand in. Yeah. Oh well, I think it'll be a beautiful piece nonetheless. Okay, so we're back to do the last layer, and I wanted to mention a couple things. First of all, we're not going to be able to do the beach sand like I had hoped. And since I'm showing you how to do this in a layered fashion, I just wanted to explain why. Orgonite is made up of layers of organic material, inorganic material, organic, inorganic, and so forth. And the organic and inorganic materials that is the best to use would be crystals, metals, and gemstones. And so we are alternating those layers to create a filtration device so that it will help protect from EMF radiation coming from cell phones, Wi-Fi towers, and 5G technologies, as well as any other negative energies. Orgonite really helps to transmute them into positive energies, and it's really a great thing to have around. So for this last layer, I'm going to go ahead and pour a whole ounce because it's the widest part of the dome. And yeah, I think that's going to work out. We may not use it all, but I want to go ahead and pour the whole ounce. Just going to pour that in my mixing cup. So with a whole ounce of resin, we're going to need 18 drops of hardener. I didn't quite pour the whole thing in because the stones will displace some of that resin, so I want to make sure that it doesn't overflow. Oh, let me measure the stones. So about 32 ounces of gemstones. And I'm going to go ahead and pour a little more resin over top, just to try to get it all encapsulated if we can. Some of them might be poking out, but we'll put feet on it, so any piece that sticks out won't make it not sit right. So with the feet, it should sit just fine, and we have the perfect colors for our piece. It's a little sad that I didn't get to put my beach sand in there, but I'll work it out. So now we're just going to let this congeal. Well, no, we're going to let this harden. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this overnight, and in the morning I'll get up and demold it with you guys, and so we'll see what we've created. I'm all excited. I've never made this piece before, so can't wait. Join me then. Okay, so it's the morning and it's time to demold our piece. It's all nice and hardened, and it's time to pop it out. Oh wow, it just came right out. Normally that mold is hard to release, but it looks beautiful. I'm loving it. I do wish I had that beach sand in there, but I'm still loving it. Oh yeah, I forgot about the feet. I use cabinet dampening bumpers for feet. They're little 1/2-inch circles, little pads, and I'm just gonna stick them on the bottom of this piece. I'm gonna do it in a triangle. Put 3 feet on it. Make sure it sits on its feet right. Yeah, that's perfect. No wobbling or anything. It's beautiful. So we did it. We made sun, surf, and sand right here today. And if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. It makes me super happy when you do that. Also, subscribe to my channel for more great Orgonite inspiration. And don't forget to hit that notification bell to find out when new Orgonite projects are released. This is Orgone. Thanks for joining me here today in my Orgonite studio. Have yourself an amazing rest of your day.